Okay, hello. Today we're going to talk about jQuery, and specifically we're going to talk about some effects in jQuery. Um, so oftentimes, web designers want to change the visibility of content, or they want to do some small animations for emphasis. So some examples are shown over here. I've got a really long piece of an article, and I want to just show a blip of that to get people's interest and not take up all this in space and real estate on the page. So we put a little see more button there, and when they click that button, we want them to see the rest of the information. Or maybe there's a see less button that hides some of the information. Similarly, for a little bit of emphasis, maybe on a navigation bar like this or a set of tabs, as we roll over something, it gets a little taller, maybe a little wider, just to show that that's the thing that you've currently moused over. Um, there are, a variety of ways to do this using straight JavaScript. As we know, we can make things appear and disappear in CSS using the display property. So there's a lot of different ways to do it today. We're going to talk about how to do some of these things utilizing the jQuery JavaScript library. So basic appearance and disappearance can be handled with the show and hide functions. You'll see over here, I've got 3 buttons set up: button 1, button 2, button 3. Here are those buttons. Button 1 is going to click a show event on a target. Button 2 is going to click a hide event on a target. And button 3 is going to click a toggle event on a target. So what we've got here is when I click this button the first time, it's going to show something. Calling show is the equivalent of saying the CSS display set to block. Calling hide is setting the CSS display property equal to none. So we're saving the need to go directly into CSS. These functions are doing the work for us. When I come down here and I click on the second button, hide, then obviously it hides it. The interesting button here is toggle. The toggle button here changes depending on the state. So right now it's hidden. When I click it, it appears. If it's here and I click it, it disappears. And then if it's gone and I click it again, it appears again. So we've got that toggling. One of the things you need to think about is how we're going to hide something from the start that we want to show later. We could, right up here in document.ready, do a hide function not inside of the click. But what you're going to get when you do that is you're going to get kind of a flash of it. As the page loads, you're going to see it and then it's going to disappear. You're much better off starting out. If I want this target text to be hidden, I'm much better off starting it with a display of none in the CSS, because that CSS loads before the content, so it will never show, it won't flash. So if you want to hide something from the beginning, I don't recommend hiding at the beginning using document.ready and jQuery. I recommend using CSS so that we avoid that flash. All right, enough of that. That's show, hide, and toggle. Next, we've got fade in, fade out, and fade toggle. They work very much the same, except show and hide and toggle are instant. It shows up, it disappears, or it flashes back and forth. Fade in and fade out gives us a little more control, gives us a little more of a transition type feel to it. When I call fade in or fade out or fade toggle, I can send in slow, or I can send in fast, or I can send in a number of milliseconds. Remembering that 1,000 milliseconds equals 1 second. When I send in slow, it has a speed of 600 milliseconds. When I send in fast, that's the equivalent of writing 200 milliseconds. If I call fade in or fade out with no parameters inside the parentheses, it will default to 400 milliseconds, so just about half a second. So right now I've got a slow fade in, which will be just a little more than half a second. And then I'm going to have let's look at that. So here's my slow fade in, just a little more than half a second to fully fade in. Then when I click button 2, we're going to call fade out fast, which is 200 milliseconds or 1/5 of a second. And now I've got this fade toggle working on 1500 milliseconds, which is 1.5 seconds. And again, just like toggle, it alters the state. So it's currently hidden. Now it will appear. And when I click it again, it will disappear. And if I click it again, it will reappear. Each time taking about a second and a half to go from totally transparent to fully opaque. One more is slide up, slide down, and slide toggle. I had to be a little creative here on my Google Slides presentation because we're a little limited in some of the animations that we can do here. But slide up, slide down, slide toggle work just like fade in, fade out, and fade toggle. Slide down makes the thing slide down and appear. Slide up makes it slide up and disappear. And then slide toggle transitions between those two things. And so you could see that you could have information that just is there and then slides in and pushes the rest of the page down and then slides back up. That's that kind of thing where you show one paragraph of the text, and if they want to see more, they click it and we show them the rest of the text. Again, using the parameters slow, fast, and this time 800, so a little less than a second. Okay. Another thing that we can do is we can animate. It allows us to animate objects utilizing CSS. Some of the things that we can do are size, position, and opacity. One of the things that we cannot do, though, is animate color. It requires a special library. It's possible, but not in basic jQuery. When we animate something, the animate function takes a list of changes. So you'll see that inside the parentheses of the animate function, we have a set of curly braces. And then we get pairs, just like we would with any CSS, top colon, left colon, opacity colon, width colon, height colon. Now, these changes are being made either absolutely or relatively. So for example, top 100 pixels. What this is going to do is it's going to move this element to exactly 100 pixels from the top of the page. So it would put it, somewhere up here. If it was already at 100, you wouldn't see any vertical movement whatsoever because it's already there. That's an absolute movement. Left, you'll see now, has a plus equals 50 pixels. And what that means is it's going to slide this object to the left 50 pixels from wherever it currently is. This signifies relative movement. Opacity gets absolutely set to 0.5, so it's halfway between transparent and opaque. The width is going to be set absolutely to 200 pixels. If it was already 200 pixels, you won't see the width change. And the height is going to decrease by 25 pixels, again, showing that relative movement. A couple notes here. First, if you're going to animate the position of something, then the position CSS attribute has to be set. Some of our options for position are absolute, relative, and fixed. I strongly recommend relative. So if you just do position colon relative in your CSS on that move me ID, then that's perfect because a relative position with no other information will leave it exactly where it would have ended up on the page in regular layout. The other piece is if we have a CSS property that is dashed, for example, if I wanted to do like font size, that usually comes as font dash size. Once we go into JavaScript, those CSS replace the dashes with camel casing. So it would be lowercase font, uppercase s, and then lowercase ize without the dash. Effect chaining, as with all jQuery commands, and we've seen this before, effect commands can be chained. So you'll see here I've got on this button click, I'm going to show the target, and then it's going to wait for 1 second. This delay command is pretty interesting. And then I'm going to animate it. It's going to move to the left from wherever it is, and it's going to increase by 700 pixels, which in our case is going to take it off the screen. So here we go. I click on it. It shows 1 second, and then it moves itself all the way across and off the screen. All right, I strongly suggest you practice these topics. Here's a link to practice that. I don't know what the other text here is. I'm gonna have to fix that later. But this link takes you to practicing jQuery effects, and this page mickeyengel.com, go into JavaScript lessons, jQueryeffects.php, and that will give you notes and links and some lecture code. Lecture code there is really good. You can download it, and a whole bunch of buttons that do a variety of different effects so that you can see how that works out. Thanks for listening, and we'll talk to you next time.